Welcome to the Active Bariatric Nutrition Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Tirapelli, bariatric sports dietitian. Today, I am so excited to chat with bariatric athlete Allie Matthews, also known as Allie's Losing It _RNY on Instagram. Allie started swimming competitively when she was 2. She played lacrosse for a bit, but by age 10, she'd made the decision to focus exclusively on swimming. Allie swam at the North Baltimore Aquatic Club until she graduated from high school in 2009. During her time at the NBAC, she made multiple top 16 in the country lists in multiple swimming events, but she always felt very mediocre because the team was so elite. Allie went to the University of Delaware and swam on the varsity swim team for 4 years. After college, she moved to Washington, D.C. and stopped all athletics and physical activity. She didn't know how to work out for herself, and she didn't like starting new things that she wasn't good at. Allie was working in restaurant operations and really began to gain a lot of weight at this time. She met her husband and they were married in 2017. Around this time, she became much more active again and found cycling was a great exercise for her. She continued to exercise consistently, but also gained weight consistently over the next 6 years. She had babies in 2019 and 2021 and continued to work out. But by summer of 2022, she wasn't sleeping well and she began to ask for help specifically with bariatric surgery. Allie had the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass in March of 2023 and lost over 150 pounds in about 6 months. She immediately focused on strength training, but added in some cardio, and she trained for her first outdoor triathlon in July of 2023. She ran her first 5-mile race in October of 2023, ran her first 10-mile race and her first half marathon in April of 2024. She is absolutely loving rediscovering her love for competition and fitness and channeling her competitiveness into some positive things. Allie decided to share her story on Instagram and started a podcast with 2 of her really good friends who are also bariatric surgery patients. The podcast is called the Former Fat Friend Podcast and is available on all major platforms. Thank you so much for being here today, Allie. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Thank you. I hope I can live up to that bio. It's quite a lot.
Oh my gosh. Honestly, I think it's helpful because when people first tune in, it's kind of like, okay, who are we listening to? You know, what is this person about? And I find that that's really helpful to kind of give a quick summary so that people understand like kind of where you started and where the journey is kind of headed. And we'll talk more about that, obviously. But I appreciate
definitely.
you coming on.
I wanted to share it because I feel like when I listen to your podcast, which I have been since before I had surgery, everyone's like, you know, a power lifter or like a long distance cyclist. And I'm like, I'm working out, you know?
Yeah. And that's what's cool about it is that I love everybody has, you know, a different area that they're interested in, different, like, you know, we're going to talk that you were a swimmer and now you're running and cycling and doing all these things. I mean, I think it's so cool to see how bariatric surgery, that journey kind of changes people's, you know, just trajectory and like things that they're interested in after surgery and the movement and, you know, so we're going to dive into all that today, if that's okay.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit more, just so people know kind of why did you choose to have bariatric surgery when you did and how it changed your life?
So it's funny because my mom had bariatric surgery. She had Roux-en-Y gastric bypass 17 years ago. Okay. And so it seems like it should have been sort of a clear answer for me, but it wasn't. I struggled with my weight. I mean, I've always sort of struggled with my weight, right? The classic story, even as an athlete, as a young person, I struggled. And as an adult, after having kids and, you know, I'm here and working out really frequently and I feel awful, right? I'm tired and I'm not sleeping well. I was starting to feel like, I don't know, do I have sleep apnea? Like I really was like waking up feeling exhausted and I had, you know, a 1 and 2 year old or whatever at the time. So that just, you know, might've been it, but I got kind of fed up with not being able to sleep well, honestly. Yeah. And there was a moment I was actually scrolling through our benefits on our insurance page. And I was looking for something for the kids and I passed this gastric bypass surgery and it clicked for me. Like, why have I not asked about this? You know, and I think in my head, I always, because I was an athlete, you know, there was like you said in the bio, there was a short period of time where I wasn't working out. I didn't know what to do. But after having kids and really after getting married, I figured it out and I was very active as far as workouts go. So I never felt like it was for me because I could still do all the things, right? Like I was still an athlete. I could run, I could swim, I could whatever. And I wasn't like, you know, couch bound or whatever. And in my head, even though I saw someone go through this in my immediate family, it just felt like such a far off solution for where I was. until that moment that I was like, you know what, this actually maybe isn't that far off for me. So anyway, from that moment, I sent the message literally in that same, while I was ironically laying on my couch, I sent this message to my doctor, and I didn't tell my husband right away. I told my sister, and set up a time with my doctor to talk about it. And from there, we just sort of, I didn't stop. My doctor kind of pushed back a little. I'm not sure, if this is right for you. And I was like, I want to talk about it. So even if you don't think that, that's fine. But let's have the conversation in person, because I want to be able to hear what you say and I want you to hear what I'm saying. Right. And then, after that, obviously shared with my husband. Eventually, he was very supportive and excited for me to do something about my own health. And then, the way it's changed my life, I think is very similar in a lot of ways to the way it changes a lot of people's lives. But I would say the biggest thing for me that's a little bit different is, in my head, I've always been an athlete. And you read it off, and I started very young, and it's always just been part of my identity. Mm-hmm. But what I looked like and what I felt like on the inside were just at complete odds with each other. And for me, I'm still getting used to it. It's been a little bit over a year now, but I'm still getting used to the fact that what I look like on the outside and what I'm able to do physically is actually right in line now with where I have always been, sort of in my mind. A little delusional maybe at times, but that's where I am. So I think that's probably the best way that it's changed for me.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I played soccer at the University of Illinois, and I can relate to you how you said that, like, after you finished collegiate sports, it was like, what do we do now? Like, I don't have a coach telling me what time I need to be there, how many days I'm lifting, what time is practice. And all of a sudden, like, for me too, I was like eating the same way and not doing any of the movements that I had been doing. Right. And you do sometimes, you can see, weight gain because you're not burning, as many calories as before. And now maybe eating patterns haven't really changed and you'd been fueling more before, it's just such a weird transitional time. And I think it's a challenge for a lot of folks that come out of like collegiate sports or, whatever, recreational, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
I was going to say, I used to maybe this is an excuse, but I used to think it's funny that you said soccer, because I'm like, well, at least if I played soccer or something, I would know how to run. We didn't do that in college. My coach would say, don't run and don't go sledding because you're going to hurt yourself. So don't do it, because we were like, swimmers are not notoriously coordinated,
Totally.
I had no idea. And I tried a couple things. Like I tried running. I joined a triathlon team here that first year, but I was working in restaurants, like I said, like inside a restaurant, which I still work in restaurants, but now I'm in corporate. And so it's very different. But my eating habits got worse, I would say. So not like I continued on doing what I was doing. They got actively worse, because now I'm trying to juggle working for the first time really in my life, and eating and not knowing how to work out, and not having any money to join a gym or whatever. And the triathlon training team was great, but at that point, I didn't really know how to ride a bike still. I learned that as an adult again. And the running, I just couldn't keep up with. It was just too hard for me. And the swimming was too easy. And it felt like elementary or like a waste of time, which sounds crazy. I know it wasn't, but that's how it felt.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And it's just such a difference. And you're trying to kind of just learn all these new things, but then try to find a new activity that you enjoy. It's hard. I know. And I want to highlight that, because so you were like an elite swimmer growing up. I mean, you swam at in college. How did that experience, in a high level of sports, competitive sports, impact your journey now, do you think?
I think it's part of the reason I got myself into trouble a little bit with not knowing how to do anything for myself. Sure. The pressure to show up, you don't think about it, but it's there, and, your scholarship depends on it. So you go, and, when you're not getting that, and it's actually something you have to work to get into your day, and not something that's predetermined for you. I mean, I think killed me. Now that's obviously sort of a short-term thing. And now looking back on it, I think I have this delusional belief that if I work hard at whatever I'm doing, I can be just as good at it as anybody else. And I think that comes from this, high level of achievement as a young person. And even then, I was working really hard. I wasn't Michael Phelps, right? I think there are limitations to that, of course, but I'm if I want to do a triathlon, I can do it. If I want to do an Ironman, which is something I've thrown back and forth and have not been serious about, I could do that. I just have to know that like the commitment, the time commitment, the plan has to be there in order for me to do it, but I could do it. And in some ways it may be, again, a little bit delusional, but it's also sort of, I don't feel a ceiling on what I can do. I'm really looking for things that I think will improve my life right now, and not that I think I have to do.
Right. I know. I feel like that pressure of like when you compete at a high level, and that kind of like, you have to be there, you have to perform. You're kind of like not at the whim of somebody else, but you're literally there to help your team, and you're, you know what I mean? You're trying to do well and do what your coaches are telling you. And that kind of not being there anymore, all of a sudden for me, I had to like redefine what was fun for me. Like, I don't, honest to God, I played soccer my entire life growing up, and I played basketball and volleyball and other sports. But once that was done, like, I didn't want to play soccer anymore.
No.
I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, I've done this my whole life. I have contributed. I mean, it's consumed me. I missed things growing up because I went to soccer, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I'm so glad. I'm so glad for the experiences. But you know what I mean? Like, I felt like, what the hell do I actually like? What is Kim like? You know what I mean? Like, what do I want to do now?
What you mean. So, I think that's so difficult. And my husband's so funny. He didn't do organized sports really growing up. He loves swimming. He's actually the person that's taught our kids to swim. He's like very patient with that. Oh. And I think it's hard for him to understand like why I don't love like swimming laps, or, like I love the water. I love being around the water, in it, whatever. And I love being there with my family and stuff, but like, I don't like to do that as a workout. It's not something that's fun for me. I think part of it is, I don't think I'm ever going to be as good as I was. And part of it was the community for me. And part of it was competition, which I'm not doing in that, so I think I'm sure it's probably a fine workout, but I always tell people it's sort of like, for me, I don't remember learning to swim ever. I just did it. Right. And, so like walking is a harder workout for me sometimes than swimming, which sounds stupid, and I know like calorically that doesn't make sense, but that's how it feels as far as a sort of like mind, the immediate like mental benefits of working out for me. It just, swimming doesn't quite do it.
Yeah. And so what are you doing now? So what are like your current training and fitness goals? Like, what have you been doing? Because you've built up, I mean, since having surgery, you've already done like a 10K or a 10 mile, a half marathon. So tell us a little bit about like that progression. Did you start right out of the gate, like with that, or, you know what I mean? So give some, us an idea of how you've progressed all the way to a half marathon already.
Yeah. So I started, I think, at like a pretty high level of fitness, even, at 320 pounds or whatever, because I was still very active and working out a lot. So I think I had a little bit of an advantage in that way. And I had gotten so used to, like I said, the mental benefits of working out that like right after surgery, I think I went like 3 days, and I was starting to go insane. Like I needed to just like do something that was so hard I couldn't think about anything else. And so I started by walking around my house. That first, I think the first day home, like my first full day, I walked like 5 miles inside my DC row home because, and I would put it on my watch, like indoor walk, and you're supposed to walk every hour. And I was like, come on, let's see how far we can go. And of course my husband's like, hey, that's all you got. Like, give it more. You got this, like he's cheered me on. And so I started walking, and then at about 7 days after surgery, I asked my doctor if I could do like a very light Peloton workout. That's what I had been doing pretty regularly before surgery. And to my surprise, she was like, yeah, sure. If it doesn't hurt, like, go ahead. And if it hurts, just stop. But otherwise you're fine. And I think I used like 3-pound weights and did like maybe a 20-minute ride, just took it super easy and was excited to be doing something. And then at about, I want to say at my 2-week follow-up, I asked about lifting, and, I was like, I just want to start something, is it okay to grab 5-pound weights or whatever? And she was like, actually, you can do whatever you want. If it hurts, stop. Yeah. Which I don't think that's normal, for everyone. And I may have misspoke. It might've been 4 weeks, but it was before that, like 6 weeks where I think most people
earlier. Than you might think. Sure.
And, so I started lifting, which was like relatively new for me because I always put so much, stock in how many calories I had burned, right? Because I was always trying to lose weight. And, so this was the first time that I was like, I'm just going to start with strength training and really see how I feel about that. And I loved it. I had done like lifting in college, a couple days a week or whatever. But I never really like pushed myself or cared. I was just showing up to be there and, because I had to be, whatever. but I remember like things like we always joke like my vertical leap in college like was so bad. They were like, Allie, you're going to want to leave the mat, like get up. And then we would do pull-ups and stuff. And I'm just hanging there and they're like, okay, go ahead. And I'm like, no, I'm going. This is all I got. I just didn't, that was not really ever a thing for me. And so I started that and I loved it. And then I had done an indoor triathlon only because I don't know if we were recording yet when I mentioned that I rode bikes as a little kid and then stopped for so long. And as an adult, couldn't do it. Then during COVID, my husband like took me to a parking lot, pushed me down the street. I learned how to ride a bike again. And so I wanted to do a triathlon. And so I started training for that the summer after I had surgery. So like 3 to 4 months in, I did it. That was really fun. I had a great time training for. Actually, my husband did it with me because I asked my sisters and they were both like, nope, no interest. And my husband's like, I'll do it. I'm like, yeah, can you? Okay.
Let's go.
And he did it like without training or doing anything. He just like popped up and showed up and did it. And then that was a lot of fun. And then after that, I kind of was like, I don't know what I want to do. I go back and forth between being like, I think there's a certain level of intensity I'm looking for and also making something achievable for me. So I kind of like struggled with like, what do I want to do? And I reset the goal at like 20 minutes per day. I don't care what it is. I'm just going to do 20 minutes. And if I'm training for something or whatever, that obviously changes, but that's sort of where I got to at the end of the summer. Yeah. And then with that, I was really lifting like 5 days a week, basically. And when I like maybe 30 minutes a day, like I said, the goal was 20 and typically I'd go to 30 and I'd feel fine with that. But I held myself to 20. And if I didn't feel like going more than that, I stopped. Like that was it. Sure. And then in October, I think Casey, who's on the podcast with me, asked about, do you guys want to do this 5-miler race? Or maybe it was our meetup group or whatever. And I was like, yeah, sure. Let's see how we do. I hadn't run since the triathlon really, but I was like, oh, let's try it out. And
let's try it.
I can walk 5 miles. So at the very worst, I'll just walk it. Yeah. I don't care. And at that point I had only been strength training, like only lifting. Yeah. And I did it and I felt great. Like I had lost a little bit more weight from when I ran in the triathlon, but it was just complete night and day. Like I think I underestimated how much that strength training would positively benefit to running.
Yes.
Like crazy good. I felt great. And so we did the 5-miler race. And then a few months later, again, Casey is the problem. She's asking if we want to do the cherry blossom race. And at first I was like, I don't know. I don't want to do that. Like, I have gotten to the point where I don't really need to like prove things to myself anymore, or to anybody else. I'm like, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. And then I was like, well, it would be fun to try it, so
let's see if I can do it.
I entered the lottery. I didn't get in. And then that made me want it more, of course. So
then you were like irritated. It's like, what the hell?
I'm like, I'm going to train for this and I'm going to raise the money to get in on a like fundraising ticket, basically. Yeah. So I did that. And I had the 10-miler race scheduled. And a friend of mine asked about a half marathon, a non-bariatric friend who's done a few half marathons before. And I was like, I do not need to be doing a half marathon in the same week I'm doing a 10-mile race for the first time. Right. And then I'm like, again, it's the delusional athlete in me is like, yeah, why not? Let's just try it. I mean, if I have to stop, I have to stop, right? Like, I don't need to be a hero, but I don't think I'm going to die doing it. So it'll be fine. Right. And so during that time, I added a ton more cardio in. So I did basically 3 days a week of lifting and then 2 days of running, which is still not much. And I would do like a shorter run with maybe speed work or whatever during the week. And then on the weekends, I would do a longer one. And that week also happened to be my birthday when I ran. So I turned 33 and I'm thinking, okay, I already have 23 miles of races. Let's just add 10 throughout the week of like a cool down or whatever. And I'll do this 33 miles for my 33rd birthday, which ended up being really fun.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I was so glad I did it.
Yeah.
I don't know what you asked me, Kim. I'm just rambling.
No, I asked you exactly that. How did you get to running a half marathon? That's what you answered. No. And honestly, a couple things that I'm hearing, which I think is so cool. Number one, you started with where you were. I mean, obviously after surgery, you have to start with, walking and basics. Yeah. And like you said, like every surgical center is different. And that's why everyone should listen. If your surgeon says, hey, you're free to do this, go ahead. I mean, you have to listen to your body and each surgical center will be different. And but what I hear that you're saying that I think is so cool is it's like there were no limitations, you were just like, I'm going to try this. Okay, I'm going to try this. And also I wanted to highlight, I love that you are literally doing all strength training, because I think a lot of folks get out of surgery and the first thing we want to focus on is like cardio, and that's because, for most people, that's what we're allowed to do initially, right? The walking or starting to, jog, run, whatever. And that's fine, or cycling, whatever, swimming. But I love that with the strength training, you then rolled right into running and how beneficial you found, because that's one of my questions later on here, which was, cross training. I know personally for me, I was doing a lot of cycling classes and lifting. And then I just decided to do like a turkey trot, like 5K. And I hadn't done any running, zero. But I felt like the lifting, and I don't know if it was the cycling helped my cardio, be okay. But it really did. I felt like when I was going over hills, like I had strength. And so do you feel like the strength training has just been a really good base to have that you could build upon?
Yeah. Game changer for me. Yeah, I think I was excited because I think I've liked cardio in the past.
Sure.
But it always kind of felt like a punishment, right? Like it always felt like you were earning something. You were, like it was cardio in the frame of a diet or whatever.
Right.
And so it was so exciting for me. I don't know if it was on your podcast or other places that I'd heard, like, you're going to lose weight, right? So the cardio is not as important. And one thing that I know, and I don't know if we'll talk about it later, but I noticed this a lot while I was running, and I'm trying to find a balance again now, is I'm way hungrier when I'm doing more cardio. And for me, the physical fitness has never been an issue, really, right? Outside of that little period of time after college. And so the food is an issue. And so if I can find a way to get the benefits of working out that I love, that I need, and also not increase my appetite to the point where I feel like I'm fighting with myself, not to go over my surgeon's recommendations or whatever. I don't want to add in something else while I'm just trying to figure out what this should look like, food wise.
Totally. And it sounds, and you've been so successful in terms of this journey of, having the bariatric surgery, having significant weight loss, and you've been doing lifting. And I, the reason I'm highlighting that is oftentimes I get, when women come and they're, hey, I want to work with you. And I ask them if they're doing resistance training. It's kind of like, well, I don't know if I want to do that. I want to lose weight. And I'm like, you can lose weight while doing strength training. It's the best thing that you can do for, your body composition, for long-term, with your metabolism being more elevated. I mean, have you found that to be true? You've been lifting this whole time.
Yeah. I mean, I look at sort of pictures of myself actually this morning, because I'm kind of, like I mentioned, in this process of figuring out kind of what my fitness goals are moving forward. And I was looking at pictures of myself from like right at sort of my lowest weight, which is not really where I am today. And I was doing more running, more cardio, and just to get ready for some of these races and stuff. And I wouldn't choose that. I mean, 100 times over, I think I think I look better. I feel a lot better. Just today, I'm thinking I've been doing some of these like boot campy style workouts, and they're definitely more like sort of HIIT cardio than strength, like traditional strength training. Sure. And I am tired. Like at 10 a.m. after I work out at 5:30, I'm pretty fatigued still.
Sure.
And, I don't know if long-term that's something that I want to commit to, because the important thing for me is that this is something that I do forever, right? Like, as long as I can, as long as my body allows it. And, I don't want to be tired at 10 a.m. with 2 kids home for the summer and all that stuff and working. I just, it's not sustainable for me. So, I think there's a little bit of a curve where like you start something new and you're a little bit more tired or whatever, but I can't recommend the lifting enough. And I think I'm also lucky that I had sort of a baseline. So I had done CrossFit as well, like in that sort of time of trying to figure out what I wanted to do after college. And between my lifting coach from college and then being in a CrossFit gym that was like hyper focused on form and like trying to prevent injuries and stuff like that, I think I was lucky in that I had sort of a base of understanding, because I look at some of these things where people are going in and lifting and they haven't done it before. And I'm not an expert on it, but I worry about people trying to jump right into strength training if you don't have a lot of base in that. And
sure.
And so I can understand too why like walking or jogging or running, whatever it is a much more approachable thing for people.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's where like, finding someone to help you, develop a program that's effective and efficient and safe and like learn the proper technique and the form, because you're not going to get the most out of these, your lifts and things if you're not, going into full range of motion and doing the lifts like they're supposed to be done, because that's what's going to help with,
Right.
gaining muscle and so forth. So then
Yeah.
just in summary, so in a typical week right now, are you still doing the 3 days of lifting and like 2 days of cardio, or has that kind of changed?
It's sort of like bled together.
Okay.
So I shared on Instagram, but I've been on sort of like this quest for what I want to do next. I was like waking up, rolling out of bed and moving into my office, which is where my Peloton is and where I've been lifting. And I felt like I've sort of like plateaued on that. Whether it's physically or mentally, I just was kind of like, about doing it.
Sure.
So I started experimenting with like the Orange Theory, F45, Barry's sort of, classes of the world, and I really like them, honestly. I love that it's like intense enough that I can't think of anything else, and it's that part is definitely there. It's a lot more cardio than I'm used to, and so I would say it's probably about a 50-50 split right now. I'm working out probably 6 days a week, and it's a 50-50 split lifting and cardio, only because those types of HIIT classes, like I don't know how to categorize them.
Right. Yeah. They're a blend. Yeah. Cause they're a blend. They're high intensity, obviously. And I mean, and you're getting your lift, and you can, what I like about those is I just show up there and they're like, okay, This is what you're doing. And I don't have to think. Also, I'm like you, I'm sure I like seeing like my heart rate. I like seeing my numbers compared to other people. Like I go to Cycle Bar and like those types of things. Cause I like to see
Cycle Bar a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I think that competitive part, that's why I think everyone needs to find what works best for you. And some people want to stick with more traditional lifts. Some people want to try the group classes, but I think in this journey after bariatric surgery, there's no wrong answer. Like you have to find what you're going to enjoy, because this is you doing it. You know what I mean? And
I agree.
It's so I hate when I see stuff online about like people kind of like judging like the classes it's like, just do you. If I want to do a group
listen,
class,
I think if I had very specific goals that didn't align with going to those classes, I would want you to tell me, right? I wouldn't want somebody to tell me. I don't know what my goals are right now, right? My goal is to move more,
there you go.
and to find something that I feel excited about again. And maybe that is like in a month, I feel excited about going into my office and doing Peloton again. I don't know. Like, I'm not committing to anything, and I don't have to have a press conference on it, I don't think. But I do think like, there are pros and cons. Like I said, I have seen, I won't say which one, but I have seen some like questionable like form and stuff that makes me worried about like putting those types of things on blast. But from what I've heard, that was unique to my experience. And that, it's just dependent on the coaches and wherever you are. So I will say that, but I don't know, maybe in 2 weeks, it's not my thing anymore. But for now, it's been fun to just try something new and whatever. So that's been about, I don't know. I finished those races in April. It's probably been really since then. I after my half marathon, I got bamboozled one more time into running a 10K with Casey again. She's the root of the problem here. And no, it was great. And I felt really excited that was a thing I could do without training for it anymore. And without it being a big deal. It was like, on Saturday, I signed up for the race. It was on Sunday, and it hurt, but I felt fine. I was good.
You're able to do it. I love that. Well, let's talk about the other side of the equation. So the nutrition aspect, can you tell us a little bit about how has that evolved? So like, to doing these longer distance, endurance type of events, how has your nutrition changed over time, would you say, since, you initially started versus now? So
that first triathlon that I was training for, I was still in this like 50 grams of carbs or less recommendation from my surgery team. And I was very dedicated to that. I was so afraid that I would mess this up, honestly. And I just did not want to mess with it. And I think there's like a delicate balance between like owning the situation you got yourself into before and also giving yourself grace and understanding that there were maybe some things you couldn't control. But I knew that I had owned a portion of where I got before, and I didn't know how to not do that again. And so as I started to train more and especially focusing on running and biking, since swimming was sort of a natural thing to me, I was still in that 50 grams of carbs or less every day. And the days where I felt like I was exerting a lot more, I would include like an applesauce pouch is what was a recommendation from a friend in our group who runs marathons and stuff like that. And so I would include that, but I would then not go over 50 grams of carbs still for the rest of the day. And we were talking total, not net. So I was eating like turkey and cheese roll-ups for the rest of the day. And I was eating when I was hungry, but like I wasn't, it wasn't the best move. I wouldn't recommend it. But I asked my nutritionist at that point through my surgery team, like, can I add in a piece of fruit if I'm feeling like exhausted after this? Or can I add in? And basically the answer was no. And so I struggled to kind of figure out exactly what that meant for me. And I listened to your podcast since before I had surgery, but I just knew that I would fail at this if I strayed from what they told me.
Sure.
And I trained for that whole thing with, one applesauce pouch a week, different than what I was doing before. And shortly after that, I had my sister and my husband both in the same week come to me and say, like, this is not what you did this for. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned this. My sister had surgery 3 weeks after I did. So we've been on this sort of journey together. So both of them were like, this is not why you did this. You did this so you could do more physically. And you're tired. Like you're exhausted because this is still disordered. Right. And it hurt to hear, but it was true. And so I sort of decided to slowly push away from that 50 grams of carbs. And then sort of like in October, I would say I went on a trip to Thailand and I just was like, you know what, this goal for me on this trip is just to enjoy what I can, and not count anything, not, try to stick to any sort of macro plan, just enjoy. Yeah. And don't go crazy, right? Like, Can I do that? Can I trust myself to do that? And I did. And I it's silly, but that trip sort of was the first time that I hadn't tracked anything since, that March. Mm-hmm. And I came back and my weight wasn't insanely different, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. This is the first time in my life. And I started to sort of trust myself more. And from then on, I have not tracked a single day, since last October. And my weight's fluctuated a little bit, but done nothing out of control. There have been a few times where I'm like, maybe I should pay more attention and whatever. But, I guess the answer is I've added a lot more carbs in, obviously from that 50. I sort of started with like, maybe I'll go to 50 net. Yeah. And then I stopped tracking and I'm like, okay, I have an idea of what I need and what makes me feel good. And I'll start there and, add in things as they come and I want them or whatever. I think I mentioned like when I was training for running races specifically, I definitely felt more hunger. And that's when I would find myself grabbing like a couple of pretzels or something, or, things I would have never dreamed of touching, 8 months before that. Cause I was just so scared. Yeah. And after doing that and realizing that like I was fine, the emotional part of that was gone for me. I wasn't scared anymore. It was just sort of figuring out what felt good. I will say like Casey's made fun of me on the podcast. I don't, maybe it was Casey or maybe it was Lisa, because the first time I ran a 10-mile run, I like to do it before the race. So I like to like kind of do a dry run and see if I can do it. And then it takes a lot of the pressure off for me. So it was like a Saturday morning and I went out to do 7 or whatever, right? Just a long run. Yeah. And I felt great. I'm like, you know what, let me see if I can do 10. That day I had 4 blackberries before my run. And Casey was like, this is what's wrong with you. Like, you can't do that. But, I got through it. Like, I wasn't, it didn't hurt. I will say I went on one like afternoon run while I was training. Cause most of the time it's mornings. I got the kids and getting ready for school, whatever. But I went on one and I felt really tired. I had taken a nap beforehand and I was like, I got to do something to wake myself up. I just feel kind of lethargic. And I didn't know that I was going for a run, but I had like a normal amount of carbs that day. And I felt like $1 million after that, because I think, most of what I was doing was in the morning. And so it was like a quick grab and go, whatever. And after having like a full lunch with like actual carbs and then doing an afternoon run, I was like, oh, wow, maybe there's something to this.
Wait a minute. This might work. Yeah. I mean, and I just want to highlight too, because I think, everyone's given specific guidelines from their surgical center, and especially really the first like year, you're just like, hey, I'm doing what they told me to do. I mean, they're the doctor, they're the team, and the dietitians there are helping you. And I've just found that there typically comes a time where, again, depending upon what you're doing for movement, it's at some point, oftentimes people find that those initial dietary recommendations just, aren't sufficient anymore. And at the same time, because you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to like go off of what they're saying. But then there's that kind of weird like place where you're like, but I feel tired all the time. And then when I do add in a little bit more carbohydrate, I really can notice the difference. And my recommendation to people is the scale of how much carb you need to add is going to be so individualized. And the sports nutrition guidelines that are out there are inappropriate for bariatric folks because you can't tolerate that amount, especially if you've had a Roux-en-Y,
Right.
And you're how far out from surgery and the timing and all those factors play a role. And so if someone that just is giving you straight sports nutrition guidelines, like you should be having, 200 carbs, it's like, well, no, I don't need that much either. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like maybe I only need 150. I don't know. I'm just throwing out a
and
number.
Frankly, like, it's scary.
That's okay. Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah.
Totally. No, I get that. And I think that's where that kind of fear mongering and that diet culture also kind of comes in, because it's like, well, I've always been told I shouldn't eat carbs, but it's like, now I've got all these cool goals. And again, how much you eat is going to be different than how much someone else eats in terms of carbs or calories or whatever. And that's okay. It's just got to find what works for you.
I think, and it's interesting. It was a reality check for me too, because I had felt like, I was a bigger person. I was a big person and I worked out. I felt like I had kind of kicked this diet culture right to the curb. Sure. Like I felt like I had conquered that, and I just hadn't yet. It resurfaced in new ways at that point for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so like, what do you have, like, what has worked for you right now, like before a workout or after workouts, for example, for recovery? What do you tend to consume?
So I'll be honest, I still look at things at like nutrition labels and kind of like, like suck all the air out of the room for a second when I'm thinking about, how to fuel for things. But one of the things I found that worked well for me was they have like these like blueberry breakfast biscuits, like before a race. They're like almost like little wafery cookie type things. They were something I had in the pantry for the kids. And I'm like, let me try that out. And I want to say it was like, I don't know, 25 to 40 grams of carbs or something. I don't remember exactly, but that was a great thing for me because it was pretty compact. I think it had a little bit of like a balance between sort of like slower and faster absorbing carbs. And I would pack them in my bag and of course never touch them on my races, but they worked pretty well. Now I'm sort of like experimenting again because I always make a protein coffee in the morning first thing, but I don't like to eat right away. First of all, because if I'm working out at home, I find if I go downstairs and start making something and then it's a 50-50. Am I going to go work out or not? And then I'm going to be doing it later on and I'm trying to fit it in where I didn't. And so I actually have found that eating at night has helped me a lot. And I never thought about that until, I had somebody recommend it to me and I was like, oh, okay. Like, and I plan for nighttime snacks. Like I know I'm going to want it. We eat dinner super early with little kids and stuff. And I'm like, there's just no reason for me to say I can't have this anymore. We're not doing that anymore. Right. And so I have things, but I plan for them. And whether they're like salty or sweet, I have something planned. And then, there's a fair amount of carbs usually in that. And I have found that helps me a lot.
Totally.
I also have found that I definitely need it more, right? Like if we're talking about physical hunger, I would say I get to a point at night where it's not mental. And I wasn't sure for a while if it was. Sure. So that nighttime sort of setup for the morning has been really helpful for me.
I can tell you, how many times, I've had folks of, all different goals, all different types of workouts. And the folks that work out first thing in the morning, it is hard to like wake up and then just like eat right away for a lot of people. Like, it's like, oh gosh, I'm just not hungry. I just woke up. I'm trying to just like wake up. And I have found that, if you're fueling throughout the day and you're incorporating carbohydrates at every meal, and like you're doing, you're kind of topping off before bed, you're getting in a snack that has some carbs, that's going to be available to you. Obviously the next day, your body has taken in that carbohydrate, it has digested it, has stored it, whether it's in glycogen or wherever it needs to go for your body's usages. But, that can be a really healthy strategy. And I've said that in prior podcasts, because I have people that are like, I can't eat before I work out. It's not happening. Period. Please don't even tell me, and I'll say, okay, no worries. What are we doing the rest of the day? Can you have something the night before, especially if you're going to be up early? It's a great strategy. And then, just thinking about staying hydrated and, for folks that are doing a shorter workout, like an hour or less, honestly, you really don't have to have something as long as you feel that you have a good energy level and you're not like hitting the wall, maybe you just need some fluids and electrolytes to get you through the workout. And then you can have your recovery meal that has protein and carbohydrate. So,
Yeah.
I don't think that's a bad strategy. I think it's a great strategy.
I think it definitely depends too on what you're doing, right? Because I was doing 30-minute lifts to do 30. I mean, the largest weights I have in my office are 20 pounds. I'm not like trying to be a power lifter in here, right?
Sure.
I just want to move. And so I don't put a ton of stock in that. Now that I'm going, like this morning I did Barry's boot camp, and it's like a HIIT style workout. And I had an apple on my way there, and I was like, because I'm just trying to figure out, I do feel like I sort of, not that I hit a wall, but I need something to be a little bit more explosive, I think, in those workouts, because they are higher intensity than what I'm used to. So, I'm thinking about like sprints on a treadmill or something, and I can definitely tell a difference in that. Yeah. And same thing with like the longer runs. Like I can maintain a slower, longer run for quite some time without a ton of extra fueling, right? But if I'm trying to get that explosive, like 30-second sprint, in the past, I've just been happy to be there, right? Like, it's great. And I don't care. Like if everybody else is running at a 10-mile-an-hour pace and I'm running at 6, I don't care, that I have different goals. That's great. But, it's not like I'm like, I wanted to keep up with everyone else, but now I've seen where I can be in those sort of like sprints and stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, I definitely noticed that I don't think I can sustain that for even 45 seconds or whatever if I don't have a little something.
Yeah. I've always kind of used this 3H rule is what we would call it, which is, generally like what I usually tell folks, if the workout's less than an hour and you're incorporating carbohydrates at your meals, you're probably fine if you don't have to have something, to eat prior. Like a lot of folks are just like, yeah, I can do it. It's fine. However, the 3H system that I always teach folks is if the workout is longer than an hour, if it's hot and humid, or if it's really hard, meaning high intensity, those are the 3 situations where carbohydrates are helpful, right? Because your muscles draw upon that for an energy source to help, you be able to push yourself and repeat whatever movements those are at a high intensity. Yeah. Also, if it's hot or humid out, you might benefit from more, carbohydrate or electrolyte replacement. So, and then of course that 1 hour timeline is where I try to, tell folks if we're getting over that, you probably would benefit from some exogenous, carbohydrates to take in. But you just, again, it's you got to find how you feel, what type of workout you're doing, and we got to go from there. So it sounds like your strategies are working and you're finding that having something a little bit maybe prior to hard workout has been helpful for you with carbohydrate. Yeah. It's still relatively new for me to try to kind of figure out, but I definitely can tell a difference. So it's something that I will continue to work on, I think, moving forward. Well, tell us, lastly, so I know you have two kids and, you've been on this journey with you have 2 young ones, and how have you achieved this balance? Because I oftentimes when I'm talking with families, and it's hard to, you've had bariatric surgery. Maybe now you're eating a certain way, perhaps that maybe your family does or doesn't want to eat the same way. Like, how do you balance all of this, your movement and nutrition and life and work and being a wife and all these things? How have you found that balance? Well, I have a really good husband who does way more than his 50%, to be honest. Sure. So probably a better parent than I am. And so that helps. But I would say a couple things. One, I try to make sure that my goals, while I think they're important, they don't interrupt my kids' lives, right? And I think that they see me working out and they see what I'm doing. And I think that's impactful and helpful. But also I don't want them to always see me doing that at the expense of my time with them. So I get up early. I am definitely more of a morning person anyway. And I typically get up at 5 and then I work out before they get up. This morning I'm walking back in the door and one of them's coming down the stairs. So we're right there. So the movement piece is definitely an early morning thing. And occasionally I miss that or I want to sleep and, or whatever, one of them's up all night and then I do it in the afternoons and that's just kind of fine. Or I don't do it that day. I don't hold myself to an all or nothing standard anymore. So that's one thing. And I would say on the food side, counterintuitively, this is probably the most I've been able to ever share with my family in eating because, now, if I want something or if I'm making something, I have it and I just don't have too much of it. If I can help it, they still slip and stuff. But I used to always think, I say this a lot, I used to always think that the healthy mom
was someone who could take their kids to get ice cream and not have any. And that was like fine with them. And I've come to realize over the last year or so that the healthy mom for me, is the mom that can go get ice cream with her kids, have it, and then not think about it all day or have a restart the next day or whatever it is. It's just part of life for us. And so like dinner times for me are way more inclusive for all of us than they were when I was on Weight Watchers or Whole30 or whatever it was before. Right. Because I can have whatever they're having. Sometimes like if we're having tacos or something, I'll have a low carb tortilla instead of their tortillas that they like or whatever. But that's like pretty much the extent of the substitutions. I'll use like different rice options. I don't really love rice anyway, and neither does my family, to be honest. So if they do something like, tortillas or something, I'll do it on rice or like a low carb rice or whatever. But so there's some changes, but like from what they see, I think it's probably, I hope, and my goal was to be a much more normal relationship with food than I ever had before. And frankly, than I saw growing up. And that was kind of one of my bigger goals for this was to show them, that it's possible to just be normal and not be fighting.
And you can, exactly. You could eat what they're doing. Maybe you're having a little less portion and that's okay. And you can still enjoy it and be part of it. And everyone's, getting to spend time together. I think that's ultimately what, a lot of folks, when I talk to them, they're just like, I just wanted to be a part of my family more. Like I felt a lot of folks would say, before I kind of, would stand back or I wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that my family could do. And now I can. And I think that's it's such a cool, like, it's like freedom. You know what I mean? It's like this new lease on life that you can now do all these things. I love that.
Yeah, I know when I said earlier that my husband and my sister both came to me in that week and said, like, you gotta like loosen the reins a bit. My husband mentioned this, and it's true. I was making everything. We were having the same types of food, but then I was spending so long weighing and measuring my food that by the time I sat down to dinner, they were like almost done. Yeah. And he's like, you didn't do this for that, right? Like you did this so you could be more free. And that's not what I'm seeing. And again, it hurt to hear. And I was like, I just don't know what to do, but it was true. And I think, part of my goal for this was to show my girls that you don't have to be on a diet, right? Like you don't, we all grew up thinking that's what you had to do and you just don't.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, do you have any advice for someone that's, maybe just recently had bariatric surgery? They're trying to kind of find their way with movement and how do I fuel for all this cool stuff that I want to do? Like, do you have any advice with maybe something that you learned along the way that you could pass on?
I have a lot of it. I think two things. One, take it slow. As frustrating as that is, take it slow because you don't want to hurt yourself, right? Or maybe not even physically hurt yourself, but mentally like beat yourself down to the point where it's not enjoyable anymore. Because that's the number one thing it needs to be, right? Like none of us are winning gold medals, probably. We don't, the goal for us is to find something that works long term. So take it slow. And the second thing is stop comparing yourself. You're not going to be at the same level. I get messages a lot about like, what did you do immediately after and stuff. And I think that's cool. I want to talk about it, but I often say like, unless you're going to go back and swim for 18 years before you have surgery, we won't be in the same place. And that's not just me. It's everyone. Right. And
totally.
I joke with Lisa, who was on your podcast before, like, if you and LeBron James showed up having never done something before, you guys are not going to be as good at, like, you're not going to be as good at him at it if it's physical, most likely. Right. So it's not, don't compare yourself because like, first of all, you have no idea if what you're seeing is that person's reality. And second of all, it doesn't do you any good, right? Compare yourself to where you are and where you've been. And I promise you will be excited about that.
Yeah. No, I love it. That's such great advice. I can't agree with you more on that because I feel like, comparing to others, it's just like our journeys are so different and you're totally different and unique. So, just do you know what I mean? Do your journey.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the podcast because I know I had Lisa on recently and I listened to your podcast as well. And I actually really enjoyed the episode where you got to share your personal story. I really found that was, interesting. And that's how kind of too, I learned more about like your swimming background and all that. So can you share with us about your podcast and where people can listen to it?
I can't believe that you listen to it. That's like such a
fangirl
moment for me. So,
yes, I swear.
Thank you. It's still crazy to me that people are listening to it, which is fantastic. So I've mentioned Lisa and Casey a few times on this episode. We're all in the DMV area, and we had the benefit of having like a meetup group that was already established, but by Casey and one other good friend of ours before Lisa and I had surgery. And we met at one of those meetup groups, and because we lived close together, we'd meet up for walks or go sort of just, start being friends, I guess. And those conversations that we were having while we were having our walks or going to dinner or coffee or whatever became so impactful, I know, for me, and later found out for both of them as well, because we are in completely different stages of life with, completely different obligations. And, I have 2 kids and I've been married 6 years, and it's just, we have completely different stories.
Different. Yeah.
And so many times I caught myself saying something as it became sort of a safer and safer space for me. I caught myself thinking like, I'm going to say this and they're not going to have any idea what I'm talking about. And it's going to be and every time they're like, oh my God, yes. And this other thing that and I'm like, yes, it just clicked. And I realized that we are so lucky to have that. And the more I started to talk to people that were not in my area, the more I realized that people don't have this level of connection, and not, I think it's so important to have what you do, which is providing facts and science-based evidence for things.
Right.
But it's also really important to know that you're not the only person who felt a certain way about a certain situation, or to know that you're not alone.
Yes.
Which I think sounds so cliche, but it's really true. And, I work in Chicago, and I met up with a couple people while I was in Chicago that we went for a walk, and it was the same sort of thing where they're asking me questions about where I was at that point in their journey or whatever. And I'm like, well, Casey says this and Lisa says this. Okay. And I'm like, guys, we should put this out there. And I think it was Casey's idea, but I sort of bought in, because I'm like, yeah, I think this is necessary. I think people
totally,
could benefit from this. And, so anyway, it has been so fun for me to get to learn about sort of podcasting. We do it all ourselves. So we're just doing the best we can, but it's been so fun, and it's really forced me, and I think the other two as well, to get a little bit deeper and a little bit more honest with ourselves and with each other about sort of how we're feeling at different stages of this. And so it's been really great. And I think we had my mom on a few weeks ago. I mentioned that she had gastric bypass 17 years ago. And one of the things I think is really positive for us has been just sharing those positive stories that have come from weight loss surgery. Because I think we all get sort of inundated with this, my cousin's uncle, whatever, who, had it and failed. Experience. And I think, it's been great to just show that, it's a struggle. There are definitely things that are hard some days, and that's okay. But really, on the whole, this is great. This has been great for us, and it's a very positive journey. So
I will, and it's called the Former Fat Friend Podcast, and they can listen to it wherever they get their podcasts, right? So they can find it wherever, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes here after we air this. But what I enjoy too is just, I like listening to you guys. It's just I feel like I'm part of the conversation when I'm listening with you guys. You're 3 and you each contribute a different perspective, and in a very non-judgmental and just kind of fun and light and sometimes emotional. I've shed a couple tears listening to some of the episodes. So I'm just saying, it's just fun to listen to. I feel like I could sit down on a cup of coffee in the morning.
You should.
And this is what I do. This is what I do. Basically, I get up at 5 before everyone's up, and I'm like, okay, it's quiet time in my house. I'm going to turn on a podcast. I sit down on the couch and I turn on your podcast or, a variety of other ones. But I just really enjoy that. It's just, it's really been, not, I don't want to say entertaining, but I just mean I listen to the whole thing. I don't zone out, so I just want to tell you guys, it's so helpful, and I appreciate you guys doing that. And I'm super, super glad you have that podcast.
Thank you. Yeah. The response has been crazy positive for us. We're just, I can't believe that people, I can believe that people want to listen to it, because I wanted something like this too. But it's just so funny to me, because it is. It's just, we're just friends. We're just, we don't have a script, or we're, it's very low budget situation,
whatever happens. But that's okay. And that's the best kind. It's just going off the cuff, and that's it. That's okay.
Yeah. It's been awesome.
And where can people, where can they contact you, follow you, on Instagram or other social media? Where can they follow you?
So I'm only on Instagram. I tried TikTok, and I failed miserably at trying to balance that too. I'm on Instagram at Allie's Losing It _ RNY. And it's Allie, ALLIE. And our podcast is also on Instagram and TikTok, actually, at Former Fat Friend Pod.
Awesome. Okay. And I'll put all those here in the show notes as well. And that way folks can just click on that and find you right away. But you guys, please give Allie a follow. Thank you so much, Allie. I appreciate your time today and sharing your story. I can relate to a lot of the things that you talked about, and I just really find it helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I can't believe I get to be on your show.
Yay.
It's crazy.
Oh my gosh. I'm honored. No, I'm honored. Awesome. Okay. Well, you guys, you can watch the full video of this podcast episode on my YouTube channel, the Active Bariatric Nutrition channel. So please make sure to subscribe to it, give it a like. And if you wouldn't mind, just maybe subscribe to it, give it a rating. That way it gets out in front of more people. And then if you don't mind also just, sharing the podcast with someone that you think would find this information helpful. That's the whole point of the podcast, is to help as many folks that we can, especially in this particular community, which is folks trying to engage in new and exciting activities and learning how to fuel for that. So if you don't mind sharing it, I'd so appreciate it. You can follow me on my social media, which is on Instagram, Active Bariatric, as well as my Facebook and TikTok channels. And if you'd like to learn more about my one-to-one bariatric nutrition coaching services, please go to my website, which is activebariatricnutrition.com, and schedule a free discovery call so we can learn more about each other. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know we've been on a little bit of a break, but we'll do a couple more episodes this summer and we'll get back onto a more consistent schedule this fall. But I appreciate you tuning in today, and we'll do this again. Take care, everybody.